Hey guys, back with another video. This one's going to be a response to Cracklotus, a good friend on YouTube here, which I've been watching his videos for quite a while now. He's relatively new in the YouTube gaming community, but definitely check his videos out. Great, honest opinions on video games. His tastes in video games is fantastic. He's big into RPGs. Just a great guy. Definitely some. He's always coming up with great ideas for videos. And a series he just started doing is a top 5 kind of series where he'll get suggestions or think of topics on his own, like a top 5 best games on the DS or a top 5 something else. And his second video was top 5 most disappointing games of last gen, which the last generation, we're kind of in the new generation now, so I thought that was a good video to do a response to. So yeah, definitely check out Cracklotus' channel. Some great videos there. And I thought, this would be a fun video to do a response to. Maybe a tad on the negative side, but I'll have to first say that this is a top 5 disappointing games. When I say a game's disappointing, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. In fact, other than like 2 games on this list, and I'm going to do some honorable mentions at the end, I didn't really hate any of these games. And how I made this list was like my level of excitement and hype going into the game, and then the level of disappointment I had after finishing it. If it was like a game I was super excited for, like crazy excited for, but I had like a sense of crushing disappointment after finishing it, that's going to probably be high on the list, as opposed to a game that I still enjoyed, but the disappointment wasn't that high. So I'd like to say that first, and let's just get right into it. At number 5 is a game that was actually on his list, and that's The Last Story. Now, this is one of the games that I actually didn't care for. I actually do have a video on my channel, like a review of this game. Part of the Operation Rainfall trilogy of games, Xenoblade, this, and Pandora's Tower. I've played maybe 30 hours of Xenoblade. I enjoyed what I played of that. I lost my save data, so I have to go back to that. Pandora's Tower I don't own yet. I played my friend's copy for like a couple hours, and actually I really enjoyed that from what I played of that game. Like, that game is really unique. I haven't played too many games like that. Like, it seems like a kind of game I'd really enjoy. Last Story, though, I was very excited for this. I'd heard great things about this game. Some people even saying like it was better than Xenoblade, a Mistwalker game, which they did Lost Odyssey, which I absolutely loved. So there was a lot of excitement going into this game, and I gotta say, it disappointed me. There's a few reasons for this. First off, the story, I don't know, the story was okay. It definitely wasn't one of the weakest parts of the game, but at the same time, it didn't really wow me. The characters I thought were kind of boring. I just didn't find myself interested in the characters. But the big thing with this game, there's a couple of big things. First off is the linearity. There's a central town that you explore in this game, and there's a bunch of side quests that you can take that kind of bring you to some other places off the beaten path, but the main town and all these areas you'd go to me, they lacked personality. Cracklotus mentioned that in his video, and I have to agree with him. The game just kind of lacked a soul, it felt. Like, it felt very soulless and just kind of dry and boring. The color palette was very, like, gray and brown. Like, the environments were just really... They just weren't fun to explore. And the game was insanely linear, too. A chapter-based progression where you just didn't get to explore too much. But I think the main thing that disappointed me with the game was the battle system. I just hated the battle system. It felt like one of those battle systems where they were trying so many different things. They were throwing so many mechanics at you, and it's like they just threw all these mechanics in this battle system, hoping it would all kind of come together and work. And to me, it just felt really sloppy. The camera was always atrocious during battle. I never could get a grasp of where my character was. It felt very button mashy in normal battles, but boss battles were so tedious in the sense that you had to employ a very specific strategy and just use it over and over and over again. A lot of it was really confusing and just random. The controls were... I was always fighting with the controls. Like, the battle system I just did not care for. And it's just... Overall, like, there's just so many things kind of came together, and I don't know, I just didn't enjoy the game. I know a lot of people love it, but I don't know, it's just one of those games where the excitement was there, not as much as some other games I'm going to mention, but I couldn't help but feel disappointed when I did eventually get to play it. Now, this fourth game is a part of a series that I really love. My favorite JRPG series, the Tales series. The game in question, Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World. I was either going to go with this or Tales of Grace's F, which I might as well mention that game. That was a pretty big disappointment for me, coming off of like the previous Tales game, and that being the first Tales game we got after a long time of just not getting them. But I did still enjoy Grace's F for the most part, where Symphonia Dawn of the New World, I gotta say I wasn't a big fan of it. And it was the last Tales game we got, actually, for a long time. And part of that disappointment is, the disappointment with this game is the fact that it's a sequel to Symphonia, which is my second favorite Tales game. And we got this lazy, rushed, low-budget game that just, it lacked in a lot of areas. For one, the story and characters in this game, like, you have the main character Emil and also the Marta, which are like, Marta's just plain annoying, and Emil is even more annoying. A very whiny character that's always apologizing, and he doesn't get remotely likable until like the very ending of the game, and it's the kind of character you just want to punch in the face the whole entire game, and he's really, really annoying. And then you had the Tales of Symphonia characters appearing, but they just didn't feel the same. They felt very different than what they were in Symphonia. Some of them had good reasons for being different, but a lot were just kind of odd. Voice acting, like the voice actors were changed for different characters. The battle system itself was still decent, but they had like this monster element thrown in there that was really half-baked and just, I don't know, made things really annoying because I never used that, and you basically had to use it to beat the final boss. You had to use one of the monsters, or a whole party of monsters almost, well, two, I think. And I just ignored that part of the game because I just really hated it. And then, of course, it turns out that you can't use the Symphonia characters to fight the final boss. There was no world map. It was just it was like a really basic map, going for, like, choosing locations on the map. The dungeons were really boring. There was a really like lazy side quest system thrown in that had gave out terrible rewards. The story itself was just not very good. It was a very short game. It just felt lazy to me. It felt low budget. I think it was a low budget Tales title, because I think it is considered kind of like a spin-off. But as a huge Tales fan, it was disappointing to play this, and I think I played it after Vesperia, which is my favorite Tales game. So a lot of the disappointment is going from Vesperia, my favorite Tales game, to this, which was just, it's, at the same time, though, this game, I wouldn't call it a horrible game. I mean, I enjoyed it enough to play through the whole thing, but, just as a huge fan of the series and after playing Vesperia, it was, a big disappointment. And, of course, we had Grace's F, which was another disappointment for me in a way. But, Tales of Xillia was amazing, though. I'm glad we're starting to get back on track, in my opinion, with the Tales games. But, yeah, Symphonia Dawn of the New World was a pretty big disappointment. At number 3 is a game that might surprise some people. Now, Mass Effect 2. Now, hear me out here. Mass Effect 2 is an amazing game. I love this game. It's a fantastic follow-up to Mass Effect. The reason why it makes number 3 on my list, though, is the disappointment level. Mass Effect 1, I guess I should mention, is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it was like my 3rd or 4th favorite game of last generation. That game I fucking loved. It was like the spiritual successor to Knights of the Old Republic on the Xbox. That game just had such a fascinating universe, really deep RPG elements, a great sense of exploration, fantastic characters, amazing writing. The setting was fantastic. I just loved all the customization that game had, and at the same time, it also felt like the storyline felt very focused, and it felt like that game could stand on its own, like it didn't actually need a sequel. Now, when they announced this game was going to be, Mass Effect was going to be a trilogy, and that we were getting Mass Effect 2, I was super excited, because Mass Effect 1, I played through that game like 5 times when I first played through that game. Like, I just loved that game. Mass Effect 2, it came out, the hype was insane. The reviews were like just like really high, like 9.5s and 10s everywhere. And I still remember, like, I was in line for that game, like, at EB Games, and I was just so excited to get home and finally play it. And I really did like it while I was playing it, but at the same time, I couldn't quite shake the feeling that Mass Effect 1 was better. It was this weird thing, and then after beating it, I started to realize why I preferred the first one, and that while I was playing it, I think I was too in that hyped mindset, especially after enjoying the first one so much. Now, Mass Effect 2 went in a more shooter-oriented way. Like, it was I don't know, a direction. There was no longer infinite ammo. Customization was severely limited compared to Mass Effect 1. The guns, there weren't even as many different gun types, I found. The combat itself was improved. I mean, the cover system was a lot better. The controls were a lot more fluid. It felt more like a third-person action game, and a good one at that. But they sacrificed the RPG part of Mass Effect to get those shooting elements. It lacked a lot of the RPG elements the first one had. Exploration was toned down. The Mako sections were removed. Instead, we had that scanning minigame, which I really didn't care for. A lot of people don't like the Mako sections, and yeah, they controlled funky. But that, I felt, added a lot to the exploration element. It made it feel like this universe was huge, and there was many different things you could do, where Mass Effect 2 felt very small in scope. It felt like the scope was just kind of gone. And then the story. Basically, Mass Effect 2 was just a bunch of, like, basically the whole game was gathering crew members, and admittedly that the ending of Mass Effect 2 is pretty epic. But also had a really disappointing final boss fight. Like, that was just terrible. But that last mission was pretty great. And the writing was still fantastic. Though at the same time, I still felt Mass Effect 1 had better writing. The characters that were new in Mass Effect 2 were amazing, and I did like how it transferred, how you could transfer your data from Mass Effect 1 to 2. That was really revolutionary for the time, really, and I really enjoyed the fact that I got to carry over my Shepard from the first one. But, I don't know, even though Mass Effect 2 improved in certain ways, it just went into that shooter direction that I really wasn't a fan of. I definitely preferred the more RPG aspects of Mass Effect 1. And Mass Effect 2 lacked a compelling villain, I thought. Mass Effect 1, the main antagonist, still one of my favorite antagonists. And then Mass Effect 2 just didn't, I don't know, it didn't have that drive for me. It just didn't have, like, I don't know, it just, the whole time playing it, I just couldn't, it just felt like I did prefer that first one. Of course, and that's where my disappointment comes from, just the fact that I love Mass Effect 1 so much, and Mass Effect 2 just went in a direction that wasn't for my preference. A lot of people really love Mass Effect 2, and I can definitely I definitely see why. It wasn't, like, the direction they took just was not something I would have hoped they went for. I would have liked, like, the inventory system gets a lot of flack in Mass Effect 1. They could have just improved the inventory system, made the scope even bigger, scrapped the Mako sections, but instead focused more on that exploration, the exploration aspects, and made it even more of an RPG, but, they went in kind of the opposite direction. And Mass Effect 2 always did feel kind of rushed to me, because it's like, I don't know, it's almost like Mass Effect 1 was that huge success, so they had to get Mass Effect 2 out quickly to capitalize on sales, and I don't know, it definitely was a bit disappointing. Mass Effect 3 was actually almost even more disappointing for a lot of people. I wasn't actually too butthurt over, like, the way they handled the ending in Mass Effect 3, but and it did fix some complaints I had about number 2, but the writing took a huge hit in number 3, I thought. But yeah, I think I've talked enough about Mass Effect 2. Again, don't get me wrong, I loved that game. I played through it twice. Mass Effect 3, I only played through once. But, I mean, that should kind of tell you right there, the fact that Mass Effect 2, I played through it twice, and I felt I was kind of done with it. Where Mass Effect 1, I just wanted to replay it. But yeah, as much as I enjoyed Mass Effect 2, there was, that disappointment, just because I loved Mass Effect 1 so much and what it did. At number 2 is The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, another game that gets a lot of love. Now this, I still like Oblivion. Well, I don't know if I should, if I like, it's okay, I guess. Okay, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind on the Xbox was a game that I thought was completely mind-blowing when I first played it. I remember renting that game, and that kind of game, that open-world Western RPG like that, I had never seen anything like that. I still remember renting that game. I can't even tell you how long I spent in the first village alone in that game. The sense of freedom was incredible to me, and I was pretty young when I played that game. But not only that, that game was an incredibly deep and involving RPG with a very interesting storyline and an incredible, unique, fascinating world. The world in that game was very... It felt like almost alien in a way. It was very, it was fascinating, filled with so many different unique characters. And it was pretty difficult, too. It was hard to fully grasp the game and its combat. It had some clunkiness, to be sure. But at the same time, that game just really impressed me. And I put so many hours into that game. So to know that we'd get this next-gen Elder Scrolls game, Oblivion, I was hyped. I actually didn't play it on the Xbox 360. I played the PC version because I actually didn't have an Xbox 360 at the time, because that was a pretty early 360 game. But I did play it on the PC. I was so excited for this game. I was like, yes, a follow-up to Morrowind. I played it for maybe 30 hours, and that was it. What's there to say about Oblivion compared to Morrowind? Again, I'm disappointed with this game in the sense that, Morrowind was just such an awesome game to me, and I was so excited for this. And it lacked a lot of the things that made Morrowind magical to me. First off, the setting. Oblivion felt so generic. It felt like the most generic Western, like, fantasy setting ever. Like, that game, like, the world just felt so boring. The characters, I thought, were completely uninteresting, with the exception of a few. I thought the main storyline was really, really boring. And of course, you had the Oblivion Gates, which were so repetitive. I hated the Oblivion Gates. Morrowind had a lot of awesome loot. There were so many different unique pieces of armor and weapons you could get. In Oblivion, all of the armor and weapons were so boring, and there was hardly any of it. And it was all in sets, like glass armor set and a Daedric armor set. Like, there was no unique, weapons and armor you could find. All the caves were just really boring and all felt the same. A lot of the games felt really copy and pasted to me. And then the RPG elements felt dumbed down to an incredible degree. Of course, you had the leveling up system where the enemies would level with you, so there was no sense of challenge. It was just again, the more I talk about this game, the more I realize just how disappointing it was to me. The music was still fantastic. Morrowind had a great soundtrack, and this game had an amazing soundtrack as well. The combat was generally an improvement. It was nowhere near as clunky, although the Elder Scrolls games have always kind of had clunky combat. They're not the type of games I play for the combat. But the questing, I thought, all the quests, with the exception of the Dark Brotherhood, I did enjoy that quest line, but with the exception of that, I just didn't find them as interesting. And everything about it just felt dumbed down compared to Morrowind, and kind of soulless in a way. It didn't feel as, fresh or as innovative as Morrowind did, and I got bored with it really fast. I think, after I beat the main storyline, I messed around for a bit more, and I didn't feel like playing anymore. I went back and played the 360 version afterwards, and it was the same thing. I'd get to a certain point and just get bored with it. Not only that, this game's got a really slow intro with killing tons of rats in that underground cavern. That was just a really slow intro. But I don't know. Morrowind just was so unique. Like I said, it felt alien, where this game just felt really generic and dumbed down. Skyrim, on the other hand, fixed a lot of the things I didn't like about Oblivion. That game I enjoyed quite a bit more. It still, though, lacked for me compared to Morrowind. In fact, the only game to kind of have that bring me back to that awesome feeling that Morrowind had were the Fallout games. Fallout 3 New Vegas, especially New Vegas. I loved that game. But, I don't know, Morrowind, again, it's one of those games where insane hype going into it and couldn't help but feel disappointed. And I've always kind of felt like it's kind of just an okay game. Although a lot of people really love it. But yeah, unfortunately, disappointing enough to make number 2 on my list. Number one is a game that I actually genuinely hate. This might get a bit ranty here. And that game is Perfect Dark Zero. Okay. Perfect Dark, probably one of my favorite first-person shooters ever on the N64. That game, fucking loved that game. So when I heard that Rare was going to be doing a sequel, kind of, I guess it's a prequel, on the Xbox 360, I knew I had to play it. It took me a while to get a 360, and the reviews for Perfect Dark Zero were really good. People seemed to really like that game. But it was quite a while till I actually got my hands on the game. So finally did get a 360. I was like, gotta play Perfect Dark Zero. This game's going to be awesome. Perfect Dark Zero is probably one of the worst games I've ever played. It is a piece of shit. Of course, my opinion, but this game almost felt like it was designed by people that had never played a first-person shooter before. Where to start with this? First off, the story, absolute bullshit. Like, the story in this is horrific. I mean, like, some of the worst storytelling I've ever seen. It is bad. The writing is cringeworthy. Joanna Dark was a badass in the original Perfect Dark. In this game, she's, like, just insufferable. Like, I can't believe what they did to her character. I mean, yeah, she is a lot younger in this game, but it's almost like they thought, well, she's younger, so she's going to be annoying, but she has to be annoying. Her character is just awful. They just completely butchered her character. It's like Metroid, like Samus in Other M, what they did to Samus for that game. That's like what they've done with Perfect Dark Zero. The campaign, the main campaign, it can be played co-op, which I've played it co-op and myself. The level designs in this game are baffling. I almost can't describe the level designs in this game, but they are some of the most tedious, excruciating levels I've ever seen. They have like waypoints that are on the ground that constantly are directing you to where you need to go, which you're going to need those because you will get lost in these environments. Not only that, there's hardly any checkpoints. If you die in this game, you have to do so much over again. And a lot of the enemies in these levels are complete bullet sponges. They take forever to kill. And the game's just fucking boring because all you're doing is killing enemies. Perfect Dark had a lot of interesting weapons, a lot of cool level designs, cool environments. This game, the environments are fucking boring. The levels are very linear, but at the same time, they're, mazy as hell. But another thing, like, the aiming in this game, honestly, some of the worst aiming I've ever seen in a first-person shooter. No matter what you set this aiming to, what sensitivity or anything like that, it is always slow as molasses. You can't aim for shit in this game. It's ridiculous. And then combine that with the bullet sponge enemies, and then there's like really terrible boss fights in this game too. And this game is painful to play. I couldn't believe how painful this game was for me to play. Like, it blew my mind how terrible these levels were. And then to add the fact that you have this constant, these constant terrible cutscenes, terrible dialogue that's super cheesy. The soundtrack is like there's like the intro song to this game. Like, it's this really poppy, like, really cheesy song that it like, honestly, like, it's one of the worst songs I've ever heard. Like, it just makes me cringe. This whole game is so cringeworthy. Then you have the multiplayer. I mean, the multiplayer is just as terrible, which Perfect Dark had amazing multiplayer. Perfect Dark, like I said before too, like weapons. The weapons in this game are extremely boring. They're really boring to use, and a lot of them are just repeats from Perfect Dark. The multiplayer has like the same issues that single player does, where everybody has like 1,000,000 HP, so it takes forever to kill anybody, and the matches like are so drawn out because of this, and it'll basically just boil down to everybody being in a wide open area, shooting each other, and just whoever happens to die first dies first, and the modes are really boring. Again, I'm getting a bit ranty here. I'm getting riled up, but that's enough. This game was just a disappointment on every level. The game looks nice. I mean, it was one of the best looking games when it came out, and it probably still holds up, but again, everything else about it is just so terrible. It's easily one of the worst first-person shooters I've ever played, coming off one of my favorites. And again, this brings me to Rare. What's happened to them? Like, it's such a shame that, you know, like they've just haven't made a good game in so long. Like, what was the last good game they did? I know a lot of people liked Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. I didn't care for it personally. I think, honestly, I go back to like Cameo, which I thought was okay. I didn't think that game was anything special, but that was like the last noteworthy game I think they've put out. Like right now they're doing like Connect games. Like that's what they have to do. Like Microsoft won't let them do original games. They have to do Connect games. Like it's just sad. You know how they can go from one of like the top tier developers to one of the worst. But yeah, Perfect Dark Zero, like, not only was, like, the hype going into it insane, the disappointment was crushing, and it's a fucking terrible game. So nothing could top that for me. Definitely Perfect Dark Zero, the most disappointing game I've ever played. One of the worst games I've ever played. So that's it, guys. Some honorable mentions. Uncharted 2. Again, that's one of those games where it never really did interest me, but the hype was just too insane for that game that I knew I had to play it. And I don't know, I've mentioned before, I just can't get into that series. It's just not my type of game, that kind of just point A to point B, linear, blockbuster type action, third-person shooter. That's just not my type of game, so I didn't really enjoy that. BioShock Infinite, I really do love BioShock Infinite, but the disappointing part of that game was just the gameplay. Like, I thought it was just a huge step down after BioShock 2. The Last of Us, again, the gameplay I thought was a letdown in that game. Amazing storyline and characters, but I don't know, the gameplay was just a bit too ordinary for me. Brutal Legend, I played the demo of that, and I thought it was a really cool, like, hack-and-slash, third-person character action game. And then it turned out it was kind of like a RTS, which I'm not really into, and a pretty simple one at that. Dragon Age 2, I think, would be a big disappointment for a lot of people. I really liked Dragon Age 2 still. I think that was on my most... It was on... I mentioned on some video. I can't remember which video, but yeah, it was a pretty big disappointment compared to the first one, but I still enjoyed it enough. And Dragon Age, even though I really loved Dragon Age, it's not one of like all my all-time favorite games or anything, so... Although, honestly, Dragon Age 2 might... Well, no. I don't know. That could have maybe made the list. That would be like number 6 or something. And then Resident Evil 6, of course. A fun game co-op, although it's one of those games where you'll hate it 1 minute and then love it the next. It's really weird. That game's really inconsistent, but I still did kind of like it. But yeah, coming off Resident Evil 5, yeah, that was a big disappointment. But anyways, that will do it. I've noticed, man, this video is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. It's almost a 30-minute video. I apologize for how lengthy this was, but I don't know. Once I started talking about these games, it was hard for me to stop. But again, check out Cracklotus' channel and his videos. I'll leave a link to his top 5 disappointments in the description box or whatever. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.